Well, Abby and Star, here we are again. We looked at our life shapes, live and grow last time. What have we got lined up today?
Well, it's the next 3 shapes. Can you remember what they were called?
Oh, flip. Serve, build, love?
Yeah, well done. Just a quick pause before we jump in so everyone can share how they've got on with the 2 life shapes, live and grow, we looked at last time. 1, how have you got on with the first 2 shapes? 2, what difference would they make if you went all in to live them out on a daily basis?
So that's been our first 2 life shapes, but now we're going to look at our next 3, and we're going to go out to do that, and we're going to begin with our next life shape, which is serve. I've got Fadzai here with me. It's great to have you, Fadzai, here. You're somebody who's been around the church for a little while, and you work around Liverpool as well. So how do you see that sort of life shape serve? How do you make that work in your own life and time at church?
So I think for me that shape is twofold. There's the side that's about church. So how do I serve my church family? How do I serve people who want to follow Jesus, who want to know Jesus? Because I think for me, I love to be able to help people. So doing teas and coffees and welcome is great because you are the first person that people see sometimes and they remember, whether it's a kind word or you're just asking after them. And I really enjoy being able to do that. I've just started doing kids work, and I think that's probably because I'm a big kid myself. So again, it's a lot of what I think church looks like for me in terms of serve isn't stuff that's difficult or extra. I think God made me a certain way, and part of how God has made me is that there are things that I enjoy doing. So I enjoy playing with kids. So that seems like a sensible way to serve my family. I enjoy making tea and coffee. I enjoy cleaning the kitchen. These are all things that are part of me that I can do to support my church family. And I think when we think about values, it's important to think outside yourself. So I think one of the best things about being a follower of Jesus is that I'm constantly reminded that I have this example of Jesus and how he served, and that's what I want to mimic in my life. And I think church makes that easier because generally I'm quite selfish. I think you're quite busy and you have lots of things, but church is this perfect environment to be able to model Christ's life. So that's my church side of things. And then in terms of work, so I'm a pharmacist, and I have been a pharmacist for about 15 years. And for me, I definitely felt a calling to pharmacy as my ministry. And I think God speaks to me more about how I serve there. So it's being a voice of kindness, of graciousness, as a team leader, the way that I can serve the kingdom of God in my place of work is through how I act, how I behave, how I respond to things. And that to me is serving God's kingdom and being then a witness to God's love for people.
That's great. And just on that, I mean, in terms of serving and living out the Christian life, both at work and in church, as you've described, which is great. What would you say are the byproducts of that? Is it all just sort of giving away, or do you feel like sometimes when you give away and serve, there's some reward for that? I think.
Oh, totally, all the time. I think often I don't want to serve. I'm tired. I've had a busy week, and I'll think, I don't want to talk to lots of people. But then you'll turn up and you'll have a conversation with somebody. And that makes me feel good, if someone's first time or, towards September when we have all our students coming. I love when you can talk to a student with their parents, and that parent then goes home thinking, my kid's being looked after. They've got a family of believers who are making them feel welcome, who might invite them for meals. And I think generally the consequence, if I may call it that, of serving is I'm the one that's rewarded. I think about in work, if I as I line manage people, and if I think about behaving in a way that's about serving them. So being gracious or being kind, I'm less stressed, I'm less frustrated, you know. I can have a conversation and just find a resolution and move on quite happily, but that's the consequence of me deciding, yes, actually, I want to be the type of leader that is kind and that listens, or that will get someone a chocolate bar, or that gets them a cup of tea. And it's not, I don't think, particularly in work, it's not about being a doormat. It's about being countercultural in how you act. So it's a simple thing like getting someone a chocolate bar when they're having a hard day, because it says, I see you, I hear you, and I appreciate what you're doing. And it may mean I have to walk round to the shop and then I have to interrupt what I'm doing. But it also means that that person then knows that they're valued and someone appreciates what they're doing. So I definitely think serving is a slightly selfish value because it benefits me quite a bit most of the time.
That's great. And of course, as you said, Jesus is our example of serving, and you know, yourself and the church family, we exemplify that as well. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. So Andy, we're thinking a bit about our shapes, our life shapes, and particularly at the moment about the serve shape. So what does that look like for you? How do you kind of live that out in day by day and week by week?
In terms of a church context, I'm involved in doing minis. I'm involved in serving for Iranian asylum seekers, help run a Bible study for them. Odd jobs around church. There's a plethora of options and opportunities in which I can serve, yeah.
What would be the thing that kind of really motivates you maybe into serving?
That's a good question. Jesus said, "For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." So he's given us an example of service. We could look at foot washing. That's another example of service. As I serve, I feel I'm following his example, and there's a kind of satisfaction that comes from doing that. So we've talked a bit about church. What I find happening is, because I'm quite handy, people ask me, "Oh, can you come and help me with this boiler cupboard? Can you help me sort out a sofa that I can't get through a door?" Odd little things like that. I go along and give a hand, and obviously the people are happy that here's somebody who can help them, but there's a satisfaction too of I'm following in Jesus' footsteps.
So that's always the framework. This is following in Jesus' footsteps, and it requires giving something of yourself away to serve others, doesn't it? I mean, Jesus obviously gave his life as a ransom, the verse you mentioned. So he gave himself away, and we're, as following him, I guess service is the high call of Christian faith. You know, we follow the one who gives us life, we follow in his example, but through that I think you give yourself away but gain something back from him as we follow him and obey him. There's a sense of, do you find that's a way of playing it out?
Yeah, it's developing the relationship. So one of the things about coming to faith in the first place is God's shown his love to us through Jesus. Well, Jesus said to Nicodemus, "You must be born again." Well, you expect a child, a baby, to grow up and have a relationship with a parent. And service is part of that growing up, of deepening that relationship.
You mentioned that little phrase about being born again and being into, you know, born into this new family. I guess serving has that added quality that it can, you know, give you a place, you know, in the family.
I would say you've hit the nail on the head there, in that you come to faith and you go, well, what do I do? And simply helping set out chairs instantly I'm part of this.
Yes.
And you become a sense of belonging into the community that you've expressed your faith to.
Yes. Belonging to the wider church family and its mission. Thank you, Andy, for sharing about serving. Well, I wonder how you got on with the serve, and there'll be more time to think about that a little bit later in this session. But we're going to go straight in now to think about the build life shape. Well, we know that before he ascended to heaven, Jesus promised his disciples that he would be with them till the end of the age as they fulfilled the Great Commission. And that's a great thought as we move into this shape of build. So great to have John and Jerome here. We've been thinking about our life shapes, and we're thinking about the build shape, guys. So I've drawn you into this conversation and really interested to think about build and building God's kingdom and seeing how you live that out as a value, as a shape, something that shapes you, a shape that you live out. So in terms of builds, John, do you want to say something about what that means for you and how you live that out?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'm not part of St James in the City now, but I came here. I actually started here on an Alpha course, which was great. I was exploring faith and I was asking questions about life, and I came here and it was a non-judgmental environment, a place where there's food, great conversations, and you know what, I found a great relationship with Jesus. And for me, I knew when I became a Christian that I wanted to share being a Christian. You know, being a Christian isn't something I do, it's who I am, but it's figuring out a way how I can share that with other people. Yeah, and I kind of knew that straight away, that is what I was called to do. I didn't even know what evangelism was. People used to say to me all the time, I'd be like, I have no clue what that means. But I just love sharing Jesus. Yeah. And you know, for me, building the church is building people, you know, and coming alongside people and just talking to them. A lot of time, we'll hear the word revival used within the church, especially in the Liverpool diocese. We'll hear it, revival, and everyone will think of these big, amazing parades that people do, and that's great. But revival starts in everyday conversation, you know what I mean? And it's just learning how to share your faith in the everyday. You know, when you know that you have that real need for Jesus, and then knowing that you have a real Jesus for that need, and you put that two together, and you can share it. Because Liverpool does need revival, but so does like Steve next door, or like Billy in the office, or Sarah that you mate who's struggling with depression. And that all starts off from little conversations saying, do you know what, we've got a great event on in church tonight, we've got Alpha going on, Jerome's preaching, when you come down, check it out, it's going to be amazing. And it's as simple as that.
Just on evangelism, is there anything else that you have found? I mean, obviously sharing your faith, but have you found anything else helpful to help you do it?
Yeah, definitely. I just think having those conversations every day within the church, a lot of times I found there's great community and people do want to know who you are and what you're doing, how your life is, what your job is. But how amazing is it to be able to have an amazing sermon in church and then go up to someone and say, hey, this is what I got from it, or this is what I didn't understand, and you know, come together in community like that. And it starts there, and then that conversation you can carry on with your mate at home. Oh my days, guess what I found out today? Jerome was preaching a boss message, and I've learned this from it, and I'm going to put it into life to help me in this way. And you know, it's starting off in the church, having these conversations, starting off with your mates, it just becomes natural. Do you know what I mean? How many of us would watch a great film and be dead excited about sharing it with your mates? Do you know what I mean? In the same way, Jesus is like that. Do you know what I mean? That relationship is an amazing thing, and once you experience it, you do naturally want to share it.
Jerome, in terms of building the kingdom as well, I mean, we've talked many a time about other aspects of building God's kingdom and seeking justice.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're somebody who's getting involved here and you're thinking along those lines, what are the kind of things that St James can help with, or St Mary's?
I think mission to me kind of makes sense as it's God working in the world, right? And so that's through telling people about Jesus. It's through different forms of justice and kind of seeing mercy kind of all over our lives and around and the lives of people around us. And so I think just getting involved with that in any way you can is a good thing to do. So whether that's kind of personally standing up for what's right in your neighborhoods or in your workplace, or you know, saying no to gossip, like very, very practical things that we can do to kind of be part of God's kingdom in that way. And as a church, like, we do something together. We're part of an organisation called Citizens, Liverpool Citizens. And this is the kind of the way, I guess, at the moment, we as a church together are kind of seeking justice. So it's kind of like a broad-based organisation which aims to listen to people and to actually make effective change here in Liverpool. So yeah, it's not, it's not to say, oh, we're going to change the world and do something crazy overseas, but it's to say, actually, we're going to have a go at listening to the people that are on our doorsteps, the people that come into our housings, into our workplaces, etc., and thinking, how can we strategically meet these needs? It's kind of like being God's hands and feet, isn't it? It's multifaceted, isn't it? Because we're talking about sharing our faith with people, we're talking about standing up for justice. When you see someone kind of come to faith, or when it makes sense of things, I remember when I was a student and I had a friend at university, he was like, oh, I'd love to hear more about faith, can I come to church with you? And so he came to Alpha, and to see his journey of exploring faith, to learn more about Jesus, to learn more about himself. What an amazing opportunity that is, right? And that me being an open person to say yes to having that conversation with someone, such a small, insignificant thing, but of course has a massive impact on somebody who was searching for Jesus, and their life is transformed because of that. That's phenomenal. It's amazing.
Definitely, I can agree with that as well. And you know what? There's been so many times where I've seen someone have a real need for Jesus, and I almost feel like we've got that golden ticket, that Willy Wonka golden ticket. It's not going to solve everyone's problems, but in the same time, I believe it does. You know what I mean? Because for me, God doesn't take away all my problems, but He reminds us in ways that He's with us in our problems, and that for me is the difference between life and death, without sounding too dramatic. And there's been so many times where I've seen people who need Jesus, and I'll be like, hey bro, can I pray for you? Or do you fancy coming to church? Or do you fancy doing Alpha? And they just say no, and I think, okay, fair enough. But then there's times where I've spoken to people and said, do you know what, do you fancy coming to this place? Do you fancy coming to Alpha? And they said yes, and they've come along, and I've seen from an outside point of view, their life changed then, through coming through the doors of church, through being welcomed by people who genuinely care, through having meal, great conversations, whether they're going away and never coming back. You know what I mean? That's not up to me. It's up to them. They're on that journey then. But then other times I've seen people make a commitment where they think, you know what, I'm going to invite Jesus into my life, or I'm going to become a Christian, or I'm going to live out these Christian values in my life. And I've seen how their life has changed, and it's been amazing. But it's not up to me what happens. I believe it's up to God, and these conversations either lead to a yes or a no, and life goes on, and we just go on to the next. And it's nothing against me personally that they said no. It hasn't killed the relationship that we've had. It hasn't killed the friendship, and vice versa. You know what I mean? If they have gone on to church, it's not like I've liked them better because they're at church. They've had a much better life experience through knowing Jesus.
Do you have an encouragement for each of us as we sort of want to step out and have a go and get involved and play a part?
End of the day, God is the one who's doing work in the world, and He invites us to participate in that. So we should be praying, and praying for our friends, praying for our family, praying for our co-workers, and being honest about that with God. So I'd say prayer is really important. I'd also say you can, often you can. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. You might just kind of put yourself at the picture, or maybe, it's for the vicar to do mission, or it's for someone who's very tall and handsome to do mission, or whatever it might be. Whatever your kind of thing is, actually, all of us who have experienced Jesus can share Jesus with other people. In ways that make sense for you, in ways that make sense for your personality, for your, just go for it. Take a little step out. And also, we don't just do it by ourselves, but we do it together. So, if you're praying for a friend and you're talking to your friend about Jesus, well, why don't you speak about that with your Connect group? And you can pray about it together, or invite them to Alpha. Let's do it together. It's not a little secret ninja thing. Actually, it's a public thing. We're sharing our faith together, and we can just do that very simply and very honestly. Actually, the good as well as the difficult times. We can just be honest about them.
So good. Well, guys, loads to think about there. Thank you very much. Well, just before we have a final pause to consider all of these life shapes in this session, we're going to go into a discussion with Matt and Ollie to talk about our love life shape. Great to be here with you, Matt and Ollie. And as we think about our life shape, the life shape of love, Matt, start with you. How do you see that being played out in the life of the church?
Well, I think when we think about love, we love God because He first loved us. That's what 1 John 4 says. And so we'll all have a story about how God met us, maybe in a low moment of our lives, maybe in a time when we really needed God. We found the love of God. And so that our expression of love comes from that place of realizing that God loved us first. And so on a Sunday, we worship together, we sing together. There's loads of different ways, and that's not just the way, but that's just one expression of how we can express our love for God, which saints have been doing for thousands of years. And so we're just continuing that love and that expression of love, really. But it's only one way of doing that.
Yeah, that's great. It reminds me of that little expression in the old prayer books. We join with all of the angels and archangels and all the company of heaven.
Wonderful.
And of course, as we gather as God's people, we do that. But obviously that's a lot of Sunday stuff. Ollie, in terms of the outside of Sundays, are there other ways you think we can, as a church, that we live out this value and people can live out this shape that we have of love?
Yeah, for sure. There's loads of opportunities in the life of our church to be able to grow in our love. We're having regular prayer gatherings, for example, our Kingdom Come nights, where we'll gather midweek together to just worship and pray and wait on the Lord, and just express and grow in our love for Him. And also there's our Connect groups where we can gather in smaller groups, and we come together, read the Word, and just really be able to grow as a smaller community in our faith and our love for God. And there's also bigger events. So every summer we go to Focus, don't we? And we have a great time. And the Bible says in Matthew, Jesus says, when 2 or more are gathered together in my name, then I will be with them. And yeah, an example of Focus is so powerful, where we can grow and be encouraged by others to grow in our love for God by gathering in our thousands to worship in one room.
Just out of interest, how do you guys do this personally? I mean, we talk about the gathered group of Christian believers together, but how do you live, grow in your love of God day by day?
I think love is like the fuel for all of these shapes that we're talking about. Love is the fuel for all of those things. And so when I am serving others, it's fueled by love. I probably don't want to be doing those things out of my own selfishness if I'm just being me-centered. But when I'm thinking about all that God has done for me, then I want to do those things. And so it doesn't matter what area of my life it is, really. It's every area, whether it's my devotion time, whether it's my service at church, whether it's what I've decided to do with my career. It's giving it all to God, all because He first loved us, really. And so there's no boundary on where the love of God gets.
It's all in. There's this love for God, this life shape that we have is about an attitude as well, and it's all in.
Yeah, I guess you can't escape the love of God, right? Yeah. I can't escape it anymore. It has found me, and I need to respond to it. And so it is an attitude, but it's not an attitude that I've come up with, but it's one that Christ served me with first.
So Ollie, about you personally, how do you grow in love?
Yeah, so I think it's really important, the whole kind of corporate worship and stuff we've talked about on Sundays and midweek stuff. But it's also about that more kind of personal secret place, and I try and find it helpful to grow my love for God through reading the Word and praying. And I've been really inspired by some of my housemates while I've been at uni. It's been really great to see how they love God, and that's inspired me to love God. And I think personally as well, it's really important for me to try and take that love that I have for God and God has for me into the world, into the people that may not know Him yet, and just being able to love in the outside world.
Well, love requires commitment. At times it will be a real challenge, but it's the best thing we can do. As the Westminster Shorter Catechism says, man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. And that gives us energy in living for Jesus. So in a nutshell, love is about loving God, which will mean spending time in His presence each day, making corporate worship a priority, and putting God first in all of life, committing to and exploring and living out His purposes for all of our lives. So here's a question. On a scale of 1 to 5, if 1 is a struggle and 5 is your absolute hotspot, where would you place yourself from 1 to 5 when it comes out to living these life shapes of serve, build, and love? If you're lower down, what could you do to move up the scale? If you're high up, how could you move that up for yourself and help others to move up with you? Have a think.
So that's where we've come from, where we are now, and what we're about as a church, seeking to live out God's purposes here, right now. We are a growing family on a mission together, building God's kingdom. We will continue to keep these life shapes at the forefront of our mind as we continue to live and work together as a church for God's glory in the world. So you'll see them on our notice boards, on our website and social feeds. You'll hear them frequently talked about on Sundays, in connect groups, prayer gatherings and in other meetings. There will be a shape focus each month in the life of our churches, and you can use them in your own personal times with God, or perhaps journal through them termly, or take one a month to grow in your own discipleship and connection with the church. You'll find the questions and information in your disciple booklet to get you going. Whether you've been around a while or you're new to St. James and St. Mary's, you are an important part of the church here. So in addition to these disciple sessions, you'll get an opportunity to move on to the SHAPE course, which will help you look at your passions, your gifts, and how you can fit into God's plan for us as we journey on together. As we close out, let's pray together.
Father Lord, thank you for this course and all that we've learned from it. I pray that we can take on each life shape and just the ones that we're least relating to, Lord, I pray that we can take that as a challenge to move forward and to just grow on a journey and a relationship with you. Amen.